and that fish would suck the bait in and blow it back out before I ever saw anything or ever felt anything. It was really cool to get that underwater footage of that. This is an excellent bait to flip on a Texas rig. I'll usually pair it with a 5/16 ounce tungsten sinker, a 4/0 VMC heavy duty wide gap hook. That's my go-to with this. Hey everybody, welcome back. It is the month of April. Wait, that means I'm not going fishing. I'm going turkey hunting. That's what that means. That's for you, babe. No fishing this month. No extra fishing, all turkey hunting. Just kidding. But it is, month of April is here, and this is a great month to go bass fishing, as well as turkey hunting if that's where you live. So that's where I will be a lot of my extra days, if there is such a thing in this month for me. But bass fishing can be fantastic this time of the year for sure. When I think of the month of April, the first thought that comes to my mind, living in East Tennessee, is the spawn. You know, this is kind of the time of the year where bass may not be quite spawning yet. They may be full-blown spawning. There's really not too many, even as you get towards the end of April, that are truly in a post-spawn type frame. But definitely, I'm thinking, you know, all around the spawn for that whole month of April. So that's a big part where we live at. You know, some places further south, you know, lower Alabama, Texas certainly. You know, a lot of those places, and obviously Florida, a lot of those fish have spawned, are done spawning. You know, there may be another wave or two of fish that are coming to spawn, but yeah, month of April, I'm definitely thinking, you know, spawning fish this time of the year. So a lot of the baits that I'm gonna have keyed in on, or you know, gonna highlight for this pick 4, are stuff that you can catch spawning fish on, whether they're visible or not. You know, to the naked eye. I don't think there's such a thing as an invisible bass. Maybe that's what some people catch that they're not able to get. I don't know. That's, I guess, a topic for a different story. But those visible fish that you can actually look down in the water and see, these are baits that you can fish in a lot of those type of places. Definitely shallow is kind of the name of my approach when it comes to the month of April. So let's start with a very, very fun way to catch them, and that is with a buzzbait. Since I only was going to pick one topwater bait for this month, the buzzbait was the one that got the nod. Definitely some other options that you could go with for the month of April, but a buzzbait is great because you're able to cover water with it. You know, it's something that you can cover a lot of ground, but it is an excellent way to catch fish that aren't quite spawning, or even on a bed, or even a few of those that are fry garters. And if you're a little further south, maybe you've got an early shad spawn going on. But a buzzbait is a fantastic way to catch those. My buzzbait color selection is really difficult. I either use a white one or I use a black one. I don't use anything else. It's one or the other. Typically, I'm going to use that black one a lot in the springtime. Clear water, dirty water. I like a black buzzbait a lot in the spring. Obviously, this is a white one that I'm holding up here, but I do like a black buzzbait, and I always fish it with a towed style trailer on it. I never use a skirt anymore whatsoever, period. I always use a towed style trailer on there. I like the way that it casts. I can skip it really well, but I like that added action of those little feet on it. I feel like the fish just actually eat that bait better. If you think of this of having a skirt, no plastic trailer whatsoever, when that fish comes up and he goes to suck that bait in, that skirt doesn't have a lot of resistance. The water's able to just literally go right past it. So that fish trying to suck that bait in, there's just not much there for it to really pull in. You've got that plastic toad on there, that fish comes up and does that vacuum effect to that bait. There's some meat there for that fish to really be able to pull that bait deep into its mouth. And I feel like I catch more fish because of that. But I do like a black buzzbait in the spring. I feel like that dark profile just generates more bites. But if you're fishing really muddy water, I'm probably going to go with that white one. But white or black, that's your only two options that you need in the springtime. Next up, kind of similar in that category, is a spinnerbait. For me, you know, there's a few different things that I'm going to think about that time of the year, but water being a little bit warmer, I'm going to go with something that I can move a little bit quicker than what I would have, you know, earlier in the year in colder water. But that water being in the upper 50s throughout the mid 60s. Double Willa is what I'm going to use a lot. I may use that Colorado Willa combination some too. And I'm going to keep that Colorado Indiana in the boat in case I run into those really muddy water situations. But that double Willa for the most part is going to put off enough vibration. If I've got fairly clear water, that double Willa is going to get it done. And then just matching the color of that with the with the watercolors that you're fishing. And I'm most of the time going to use just that Cajun style trailer from Bass Pro Shops on that, just that split tail trailer, just a good natural profile, a little bit hanging back there behind the skirt. Those fish are able to see that and key in on it. A big thing with a spinnerbait, especially this time of the year, is I'm going to use a trailer hook, a VMC, typically a 1/0 trailer hook on that spinnerbait. But yeah, that Terminator Pro Series, this is a 1/2 ounce. Probably going to be where I start. If I'm fishing real shallow, I may back down to that 3/8, but that Pro Series spinnerbait's got a lot of great colors, blade combinations. It's got everything that you need in that line of baits. Now I'm going to shift over to some soft plastics. A soft plastic when those bass are spawning is really, really hard to beat. If those fish are where you can actually see them, or if you just know areas where they're at, that they're spawning, say down in some buck bushes or something like that, getting your bait down in there to those fish is what's going to be most important. I've got a great video of actually catching some fish off of the bed from last year down on a small lake in Texas. You can watch that and watch me use some of this stuff as well as some other techniques. But soft plastics are a fantastic way to catch fish, whether you're actually, like I said, visibly fishing for them, or just fishing targets and stuff for those fish. This is a Bass Pro Bullhog, just a good creature style bait with those appendages on it. It moves a lot without actually having to move the bait a lot. You don't have to cover a lot of ground with it to get those appendages to flare, to move, to kick, to look like they're disturbing something down there on that bass's bed. So this is an excellent bait to flip on a Texas rig. I'll usually pair it with a 5/16 ounce tungsten sinker, a 4/0 VMC heavy duty wide gap hook. That's my go-to with this. Another great thing, and if you watch that bed fishing video, I was doing this more with a swim bait, but a great way to rig this, if you know those fish are spawning and you can see them, is on that Tokyo rig. That's something that will keep that bait up off the bottom just a little bit. And that Tokyo rig, having your bait hover above the bottom on those fish that are spawning, is just dynamite. Man, you can really aggravate those fish really, really well with that Tokyo rig on the bed. So that's kind of a little hidden secret that has been very effective for me. But yeah, Bass Pro Bullhog, Okeechobee crawl color, Sooner Run is a great color. Yeah, just any of those natural crawdad type colors. And then if you are sight fishing, go with something bright, something that you can see. That's a really good way to be able to trigger those fish into biting, but then you're going to know when that fish has the bait, so you know when to set the hook. Again, referring back to that video, there were a lot of times when with that swim bait that the fish would be turned away from me, blocking the bait. I couldn't see it, and that fish would suck the bait in and blow it back out before I ever saw anything or ever felt anything. It was really cool to get that underwater footage of that. Final bait is really the one I've got tied on all the time if I know those fish are spawning. And that's a Bass Pro Finesse Fennec worm. This is a bait that has been so good to me. I think of the first big tournament I ever won. Now it wasn't on the Bass Pro worm, but this style worm, just a 6.5, 7 inch straight tail worm. First big tournament I ever won was on Santee Cooper. Back then it was called an EverStart Series. It's what the Toyota Series are now. But for 4 days I had like 94 pounds or something out there on Santee Cooper, but caught those fish wacky rigging a worm, just like this, a green pumpkin, just weightless. And I won't go fishing in the month of April without a wacky rig tied on. Parker won't either. It's by far his favorite way to fish. A couple of his biggest fish to date have come on a wacky rig. But that's my favorite way to fish this bait. I'll fish it on a shaky head. I'll even fish it on a Texas rig if that's what I need to do in the cover. But a weightless wacky rig with that Bass Pro Finesse Fennec worm is an absolute go-to when those fish are spawning. And I'll sight fish with it. I'll literally target fish on the bed with this. I'll just blind cast it to places where I know fish are spawning. I'll cast it to light spots that I can see on the bottom. and I've caught them on Lake Okeechobee. I've caught them on Lake Cayuga in New York, and I've caught them in, out in Texas, and I've caught them in California on the California Delta on this style worm, Wacky rigged, no weight whatsoever. It is just a dynamite way to catch them. Sticko worm is great as well. And if those fish are a little deeper and I can get by with a sticko worm or a Wacky sticko, I like that because it's heavier, it sinks faster. But if those fish are super, super shallow, that worm being so lightweight and sinking so much slower will get a lot of bites, where those little bit heavier stick worm style ones won't get those bites. But I've got 3 laid out here. I've got a watermelon seed, which I'm going to use a lot in clear water. Green pumpkin is my go-to all around. But then the last one I've got rigged up here, and this is the hook that I use, is a VMC. I either use a number 2 or number 1 weedless Nico hook. I like the number 2 if I'm not catching a lot of big fish. Like if everything I'm catching for the most part is 3 pounds or less, I'll go with the number 2. It's a little bit lighter wire, and on those smaller fish, I don't typically have any trouble. But if I'm in a place and I've really got the potential of catching a 6, 7, 8 pound fish, or I'm catching a lot of 4+ pound fish, I'm gonna step up to that number 1, just a little bit heavier wire, and I don't have to worry about those fish opening up that hook as much. With that hook, I've rigged it up with 10 pound Bass Pro Hyper Braid, 12 pound XPS fluorocarbon leader, and I'll boat swing 3.5 to 4 pound fish on that hook on spinning tackle. So I've just got a lot of confidence in it, and it's a really, really strong hook. But the color of the worm, so I've got a watermelon, extremely natural. I've got green pumpkin, very natural. And then I've got bubble gum, not very natural. This one is my, it's kind of one that I use in odd situations. I'll use it in clear water. I'll use it in pretty dirty water. A little quick story with the effectiveness of this color. The Bass Pro Tour event that I won down on Lake Fork with the championship on Lake Athens, the Lake Fork part of that event, those fish were spawning. You could see some of them you couldn't. But that lake gets so much fishing pressure out there on Fork. And a lot of those people, they're throwing a Wacky worm, no different than I am. They're fishing a lot of the same places I was fishing. But they were using natural colors for the most part, and they were catching some fish. They were catching fish here and there in some of those pockets. But I could go behind them with this gaudy pink worm, rigged Wacky rig, fishing it up near the surface, and I would catch more fish than what they were doing. Honestly, that's the only reason I went to that color, because everybody else I saw fishing was using natural colors. I've caught a ton of fish on a pink worm like that before, but for that situation, I had a ton of confidence fishing around other people because I knew I was doing something different. A lot of times with those fish on the bed, it's not necessarily about trying to get a feeding bite out of them. You're just trying to get them to react to something. Something gaudy like that pink worm was a good way to do that in that particular situation. So just a little story behind that pink Wacky worm from down there at Lake Fork. But yeah, month of April, it's a great month to get in the woods and listen to a turkey gobble. But it's also a fantastic month to get out on the water and target some of those fish that may be spawning, may not quite be spawning yet, and a few of them that may already be starting to get done. So an excellent month, a very fun month, because you get to see a lot of that stuff happen, and probably more so than any other time of the year, actually looking into the water in our part of the country. So I hope you've enjoyed this. We'll be sure to see you out there on the water.